Have you ever been depressed? If you haven't, then consider yourself lucky, because anxiety, depression, the regular assortion of mental unwellness seems to be increasing, at least in terms of diagnosis. This could be partially because of an increased awareness that didn't exist previously. It could be attributed to our awareness of things in the state of the world. Because of social media, it could be attributed to the worsening material conditions of your average person under late-stage capitalism. You could really blame it on all kinds of different things. But it depends on the person, and lots of people have experienced depression, and sometimes it can be something more logical. There can be an inciting incident, like a breakup, and that is the case in the Chantal Akerman feature film Elle, where the protagonist is basically really depressed for, I'd say, about the first third of the movie. She basically just sits in a mostly empty room and eats a bag of sugar, literally has a bag of sugar and a spoon, and just not eating sweets or cookies or what candy, whatever, just straight up sugar. And we just hold on it. It's very slow, very almost meditative in a way. It's sort of, if you're not familiar with the work of Chantal Akerman, she could easily be categorized as part of slow cinema. There's plenty of filmmakers, when you get more into the weeds of cinema, I guess, more into the Criterion Collection type of movies. You can buy her works or in the Criterion Collection. You can view them on the Criterion channel if that's what you're into. But it's all very slow and meditative, and there's long silences, long awkwardness, and whereas usually this might be frustrating or leave your mind to wander, I feel it really contributes to the overall feeling of the film. And it gives you time to sit with our protagonist and her emotions, having gone through a breakup and being depressed. In fact, it's one of the most accurate depictions of depression I've ever seen on film. I've experienced a great deal of depression in my life. I won't get too in the weeds with it, but prior to transition, lots of my memories just feel like a depressed haze. It's not to say there weren't good moments, but it's nice to just take a minute and meditate and just be one with a work of art. Whether your mind wanders or not, whether you're in the present, consistently, or if you're sort of start thinking of other things now and then, or if you start thinking like, whoa, they really did this, they really went this bold with this film. It's something I've always appreciated about slow cinema. You got to be in a real specific state of mind. It's not the type of film you can, watch with your buddies after you've had a joint or whatever. Like, it's a very sobering sort of I'd recommend experiencing it sober, but also it's a sobering sort of experience of you're in the moment, you're meditative. Very similar to Andrei Tarkovsky in that way, but less spiritual and more personal, I would say, is how I feel about her work. She's also directed Jeanne Dielman. Very long movie. I think it's the top rated in the Sight and Sound list of best films ever made. That's not what this video is about, though. It's about Je elle, and she sits around for at least the first third of the movie, if not longer, and eventually she does wander out, and she kind of hooks up with this trucker person, this trucker man, I should say, and it's a rather, they go to a restaurant, she goes to a washroom, and then they sort of have I guess, a sexual encounter in his truck. And the entire time it's rather awkward and sterile, and based on some of the borderline pedophilic things this guy says, like, it's all very uncomfortable and creepy, this interaction. But then after this, she goes back to the apartment of who we, as the audience, can only assume to be her ex-lover. And they kind of chat for a little bit, and then they hook up, they have sex with each other, and that's where the film ends. And it's all really raw and uncut. Like, I think the only cuts in the film are when it transitions into a new setting, like when she goes outside or when she does whatever. It's all very still, camera on a tripod type thing. And the sex scene, it's not a typical sex scene. Like, it is arguably pornographic is what it is. It's just they're literally having sex, lesbian sex on camera. And this was released back in the 70s, so quite revolutionary for the time. A very important piece of queer cinema that I don't see discussed very often. And I think part of that is it's not like as fun or enjoyable to watch. But if you're a real true queer cinephile, then I highly recommend this film. When I first watched it, I was in a real negative state of mind. I hadn't started hormones yet. I think I was still unemployed. I had just finished film school. And I honestly think that it's one of the characters I've connected with the most out of any film I've watched. And I guess it makes sense in a way that Chantal Akerman so accurately depicted depression. Many decades later, I believe when she was in her 50s, in the 2010s, she took her own life. And it's a horrible, it's like the worst thing you can do, you know? It's like such a horrible thing that can happen. Thing that, you know, to be in that state of mind, it's just the worst, right? I mean, especially such a genius. But even if you're not a genius, even if you're nobody, why deprive yourself of these experiences? But the truth is that it's not that simple. It never is. And art that delves into these darker subject matters has sort of given me some sort of direction, some sort of purpose in life, and other people as well, whether it be discussing art with other people or even just hanging out. You know, community is very important. But a work like this that it helped me in a very specific time in my life. And it's not a very uplifting film per se. I mean, she is happy in the end technically, but it's very short-lived. She's hooking up with an ex. It's not like she's, you know, It's not your typical Hollywood happy ending. It's a French film, if you couldn't tell by the French title. It's not really lumped in with the French New Wave. I think it doesn't really fit into the typical tropes of that category of a film movement, but it is from France around that time period. This is a film I'd recommend, but you really gotta lock in and just focus and give your whole undivided attention to it, because it's a real work of art, and it's not fair. It wouldn't be fair to just like half-ass it, play in the background while you're doing dishes or something. It's not. It's an experience, and like a very sort of meditative thing. You got to be in a very specific state of mind. You can't be playing Flappy Bird, Flappy Bird or whatever. You can't be scrolling through social media while you're playing it. It's not to say you can't look away, and also do it while you're energized. If you're tired, you're probably going to fall asleep. It's not the type of film that's for everybody, but I think if you like it, if it sounds interesting based on what I've described, you will love it. But I really have kind of learned to, I don't watch slow cinema a lot, but I've kind of learned to appreciate it when I do watch it. Because in our modern era where we're so, our attention spans are so overloaded by all the short form content, and everything is edited so quickly, and just like it's all this desperate plea to keep our attention, and it's nice to just slow down and experience something meaningful. But the truth of the matter is that if it wasn't for art like this, I don't know if I would have made it as far as I did in life. And that's not to say I've accomplished anything great. I'm 22 years old, and I'm working a job it's okay, but it's just some retail job. And I was doing some freelance video editing stuff, but that's sort of dried up. And I think AI is to blame. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to ever do this film stuff as an actual career. But then again, I critique all the time the concept of film as a being only valued by the monetary aspect and never by the art itself. And you could argue that's the same for any art form, and that will always be the case. And you'd be correct, frankly. But there's not really, I don't know. The arts have never been an easy career to get into, let's be honest. Obviously right now is an extraordinarily unique and complex time, but if I was born in the 70s, that wouldn't make it any easier. In fact, I'm quite glad I was born when I was, and I'm alive when I am, despite everything. Because things are better in many ways, even if they are worse in some other ways. And as much as I love to edit, and I am an editor, and I love movies with good editing, there is something to be said about a nice long take, a nice uncut sort of thing. There's plenty of filmmakers who I love for that exact reason. It doesn't even have to be slow cinema. Like, it can even be like, blanking on examples here, but like Joel Haver, he does some movies on YouTube, a very different vibe, very different subject matter than Chantal Akerman, but Yeah, he's just someone who comes to mind as like a modern example of someone who just takes it, just takes like raw moments and just films it and puts it together in a narrative. And that's sort of the vibe I get from Chantal Akerman. You know, she was very young. I think she was around my age when she made elle. Maybe even younger. I'm not sure. And it's sort of inspiring. Like, obviously, things have definitely changed, you know, in the decades since then. But, you know, with the technology we have available now, I do think that for young filmmakers up and coming, like, we have it pretty good. We have it bad, yes, but we also do have it good in some ways. It's complicated. The way the film delves into the sort of the protagonist's bisexuality or alleged bisexuality. She doesn't seem into the man, but even if she is into men, I can understand why she wouldn't be into that man in particular. He was a total creep. But I almost wonder if it's like a comp-het thing, like if she feels obligated to be heterosexual, but really she's a lesbian. Maybe even that is like, that's certainly I would assume that's a common reading of this work, but you know, even that, like, that could be an oversimplification. You know, I mean, other than being a trans woman, I am queer. I don't know if I would call myself bisexual or pansexual or even somewhere on the asexual spectrum, maybe. But it's hard to articulate these things, and that's really what I think cinema does great as an art form, is you can sort of communicate these big abstract concepts that are difficult to put into words, but you can sort of show them. I mean, there's obviously there's that famous Roger Ebert quote that cinema is an empathy machine. I have many disagreements with Roger Ebert, but I really do agree with that. And even if you've never experienced depression for yourself, elle is definitely something I would recommend because it will expand your mind about what depression is like, and you know, you can feel free to disagree with me, but as someone who's experienced a fair bit of depression, I do think it is the most accurate depiction of depression there ever could be. Maybe not there ever could be, but there ever has been on cinema, as far as from what I've seen personally. But there's a lot of horrible stuff going on in the world, right? And it's important just to remember that you're not alone. And even if it's just some French filmmaker from the 70s who seems to have a sort of similar, not even similar experience, but similar in ways emotionally that you can connect with on a deeper level, that's still better than no one. And at the time when I first watched this, I was just so closed off and isolated from even people who I considered close friends that this film meant a lot to me. It's peak depressed bisexual cinema, to put it in a very clickable way, a very clickable title. maybe, I don't know if that's what I'm gonna call this. If you are at all interested in slow cinema, feminist cinema, queer cinema, cinema in general, cinema about depression, then this film is the absolute pinnacle from what I've seen. You know, there's too many movies. I can't say out of every movie ever made. There might be a better example, but it resonated with me on a really profound level. And I hope it will with you as well, if you watch it or if you have watched it. And honestly, if it's not for you, that's fine, but I don't want to downplay its importance to me, but it's difficult to present it in a way that is in a way that fully encapsulates the way it's made me feel. So I really can't. I can only talk and hope that I'm effective of a communicator enough that the point gets across, but I'm not confident in that. But hopefully, if I make work in the future that revolves around depression, I can take my cues from Chantal Akerman, because she is such a genius filmmaker. And I cannot wait to explore more of her filmography, because I really haven't done my due diligence in that, because there's just so many movies in the world, right? But she's someone who I think deserves me doing a deep dive on. And any cinephile who is interested in her work should do a deep dive on the stuff she's made. At the end of the day, I think this is the type of movie you just have to see for yourself, and let me know what you think. Do you agree or disagree or whatever, you know? Or do you maybe have some stuff to add? Do you think maybe I was wrong in my reading of it being, you know, a compet kind of story of how she's actually a lesbian? Or do you actually think that maybe this isn't the best depiction of depression in cinema, and that there's a better version, or you don't think this one's very good, or it's just not true to your personal experience, right? It seems fairly true to mine, because, you know, there's just times where you don't have enough energy and you do just kind of sit around like she does in that film. But maybe that's not the case for what you've experienced. But let me know. And if you liked this, I know this is very different from the other stuff I've posted on this channel, but if you did like it, give it a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to see more cinema discussion type videos. And I guess just remember to take the cinephile pill.